Hello everybody, I'm Nora Burrows. I had an idea. I want to try and make a quilted towel. So it would be towel fabric on one side and then the traditional quilting cotton on the other side. So I have two fabrics here. This one I just showed you in the most recent fabric haul. I just got this and then I've had this. So I want to use these two on the front, and then I got this traditional towel fabric in gray for the back. I think those will go nicely together. Let me show you how I'm thinking about doing this. I've cut two strips of fabric from each pattern here to be 8 inches wide. So now I'm going to sew these strips together every other one. So it'll be checkerboard, floral, checkerboard, floral, big strips. I have sewn my 4 strips together here. Each strip was 67 inches long, and then as I mentioned, 8 inches wide, so they'll finish at 7.5. Now, what I think I want to do, this will be the top of the towel. I do think, visually speaking, it's a little unbalanced, and so I want to add either another floral to this side or a checkerboard to the other side. So let me lay this out and let's see what looks best. Here's the top so far, and I'm thinking what I want to do is add a strip to this side of the checkerboard. It will just make the towel a little bit wider, which will be nice and cozy, but then also visually speaking, it will add some balance and just look a little bit better. So I'm going to add that strip onto this side. I'll have the top done at that point, and then we can take a look at the next step. Here I've added my additional strip over there, and then I've flipped my entire quilt top over so that the right sides are together with the towel that's underneath. As you can see kind of right here, I put the towel underneath my quilt top and put them right sides together. Now there's 2 ways to finish this off, and I'm gonna do the easier way, but I'll tell you about the way that might look a little bit cleaner and nicer. Let me tell you what I'm gonna do first. I'm going to sew 1/2 inch all the way around the outside, leaving a gap, and then flip it inside out and then top stitch around. Now the other thing that you could do that I think would look really cool is you could put your quilt top wrong sides together with the backing so that your quilt top is facing up. Leave about 2 inches of towel around the entire thing. Then you could do some quilting, either stitch in the ditch or quilt along the flowers or whatever you wanted to do. And then you would bring the back, you would fold it over and bring the back to the front, just like you do with a regular quilt. Now, I'm not using any batting here. Either way, you wouldn't use any batting, but it's the same idea that you see in quilts where the binding is created by bringing the back of the quilt to the front. And so you could do that in this case as well. And what would be cool about that is you would have along your quilt top when you were done a little bit of a edge, a binding of the towel. The way that I'm doing it here, I won't have any edge of towel, but that would be cool to along the front have just a little bit of towel on the front as well as the full towel on the back. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to trim off my side here, stitch around the outside, and then we'll see what's next. As you can see here, I've put my quilt top or my towel top right sides together with the towel fabric on the back, and then I've trimmed them nice and straight, 90-degree angle. I will sew 1/2 inch all the way around the outside, leaving an opening. You can also see here that instead of pins, I've used these binding clips. I almost always use clips instead of pins. They work just as well. And I've heard so many horror stories of people having, permanent tragedies because of, stepping on pins that have gotten lost on the floor. And since I sew in my dining room, I want to make especially sure that I don't end up with any pins on the ground, since that's where my family is much of the time. I'm not in a sewing room. So anyway, I have my binding clips. I'll sew along the edge, and then we'll take a look at what's next. Now that I've sewn all the way around the outside, I'm going to trim my corners. This will help to reduce bulk and help it to lay nice and flat. So I'll do that for all 4 corners. Then I will find my opening, which is right here, and reach my hand in and flip it right side out. This is coming out pretty well so far. It actually has a really nice weight to it. It's heavier than a regular towel. So now that I flipped it inside out, I still have this hole here. So what I'll do is fold in both sides 1/2 inch and use my clips. Let me go get my clips. And use my clips to secure this hole shut. Want to make sure both sides are about even. 1/2 inch folded in on both the towel side and the quilt top side. And I'll just go all the way. I made my hole pretty big because I didn't want to pull at the towel fabric or rip my seams at all. But it probably didn't need to be this big. All right, so now I'll top stitch about 1/8 of an inch all the way around the entire towel. As I top stitch around the towel, and I actually put these clips on upside down, I'm realizing it doesn't really matter, but as I'm going along the entire towel here, what I'll do is kind of make sure that the top is kind of folded all the way out and the backing is folded all the way out so that nothing's getting kind of crunched into the seam there. So as I go all the way around, I'm just going to pay extra close attention to kind of make sure that this seam is really pulled out and not tucked in. I think I'm going to do 2 things at this point. So I sewed along the edge there, pretty close to the edge. But the first thing that I'm going to do is sew stitch in the ditch along each of these really long seams, and that will secure the front and the back together really nicely. The other thing I'm going to do is add a second stitch line, probably like 1/2 inch above the first line. I think that will just make it look a little bit cleaner, especially around the edges. It'll just look a little bit nicer. And because you know, I had that 1/2 inch kind of tucked inside of the towel here, if I top stitch along that 1/2 inch, this will kind of bulge out a little bit because there's fabric tucked in there. So that will look nice, I think, I hope. But this is great. It has a really, really beautiful drape to it that I wasn't quite expecting. So that's really good. Let me do those seams, those top stitching seams along the edge and the quilting in the middle, and then we'll take a look. The beach towel is finished. We'll get a closer look at it in a second. I'm really happy with how it came out. The towel fabric was really easy to use. I wasn't sure how that would go, but it wasn't stretchy at all. So it combined with the quilting cotton really nicely. You could do all kinds of different piecing on your towel quilts. I think it would be really cool to do large checkerboard or, you know, really big diamonds. The other thing is you could just leave it as one solid piece of fabric, and I think there's a lot of big prints that would work well with. Specifically, I think some of the Cafe prints would be awesome beach towels. Let's take a closer look. This, I think, would make a great gift, Mother's Day, birthday. I'm actually going to give this to my mom for her birthday that's coming up. Let me give you a closer look of the stitching. So there's the double stitching, the one I did right along the outside, and then the one farther on the inside. That seemed to work well. You don't need a lot of quilting, and then as I mentioned, I went stitch in the ditch along the seam lines. You don't need a lot of quilting because there is no batting. So when you wash it, nothing is going to shift around on the inside. The other thing that you could do, and I may do, especially if it's a gift, is embroider or applique or even just put a label of the giftee's initials. That I think would be really cool. I might put my mom's initials down here, just cut out some fabric with her, in the letters of her name, and just top stitch it right on. Another thing you could do, which I think I'm not gonna do, is put a little loop. If you sewed a little loop of fabric, then the giftee could hang it, or if you're keeping it, you could hang it on a towel hook. I hope this gives you some ideas. Here's kind of how it flows. It has a great weight to it. I'm really happy with how this came out. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.